Welcome to the Halal Fantasy Football League. This is the Week 11 recap. I am making a real cocktail today, but I am drinking something. This is Patron, extra Anejo, so aged in the barrel for a little bit longer. Straight, oh, Jason. So we had an interesting week. Injuries continue to pile on. So people's teams be getting messed up. And then even new guys, new guys that come in all of a sudden they're injured. There are some coming back that have kind of changed a few of the outcomes of some of the scores. And then there was some pretty wild stuff happening. Like in Buffalo, they had to move the game between Buffalo and the Browns to Ford Field in Detroit. And that was so confusing because when I was watching Red Zone, they're like, let's turn our attention to Detroit. I'm like, okay, let's see the Lions. And then they're showing the Bills and they're showing the Browns. Other than that, they had a game in Mexico tonight that created a little bit of drama for a couple of the games. And as far as the shaping up of the playoff picture, it is pretty interesting because even for the guys at the bottom of the standings, there's still a little bit of chance and a little bit of hope. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, let's get to the recaps. Try to do this as fast as I can so I don't have to spend too much time trying to edit these. Let's look at this first game. Father versus son. Captain Morgs versus Mike L. I think this was the closest game, right? This one went down to the wire. 113.5 for Morgan, knocking off his dad, 111.36. And it was going to be, originally it was projected to be more of a game for Morgan, but he was able to stave off his dad. Mostly because Josh Allen only had 14.68. He's still running around and playing nuts, but he's not putting up the big points, so I don't know if the injuries are hurting him. And then Jalen Hurts is putting up pretty good numbers, and that was kind of weird because that was a low-scoring game, relatively low-scoring game, but at least he was able to put up almost 30 points. And then the notables for them, Morgan had some pretty decent scores from Sutton, 10.5. Jonathan Taylor starting to maybe eke into form, 18.1. I know he started to look good at the beginning of the game, but then they kind of got shut down. Gibson, good play there, 15.52. He had 18 rushing attempts, and I think the only frustrating thing about their backfield is sometimes they give all the carries to Gibson, sometimes they give them to Robinson. You're just so fortunate that you were able to get all the carries today. Farmers had a decent 11.9. Slayton had 11.1. Nick Folk only had 3.9. And the Washington D, whoa, what a smart play there. Knowing that Houston is the worst, I still wouldn't have expected 20.3 points, but that's what you got. And on your bench, not expected, but Prescott outperformed Josh Allen in that blowout. They killed Minnesota 40-3. So not only does Morgan knock out Mike, we also knock out Mike's. They were looking like a dominant team, especially after beating the Bills last week. Only to get crushed 40-3. So sorry for your Vikings. So not a good week for Mike. For his teams, really the only reason why he kind of made it kind of close is Travis Kelce, who had 32.5 points, which is bananas. And then Butker having 16 points, which is a lot for a kicker. Looks like you did not play it right. These are, I want to say, these are tough decisions though, right? So playing Carter, understandable. MVS, maybe understandable. Mooney, you never know what's going to happen with him because of sometimes Justin Fields finds him, sometimes Justin Fields is running around. And Keenan Allen, they did say he was coming back and he would make an impact, but can't blame you for not playing him as a first game back because you don't know how he's going to be. And then your other kicker did pretty good. And then other than that, oh wait, Mike Williams too. So speaking of the what happens with the Chargers offense, they're a totally different team with Allen and Williams back. Only problem is Williams didn't last that long. It looked like he got injured again. So, but you're gonna see how it affected somebody else's score because even with those guys there, their replacements actually kind of went bananas and bonkers. So Morgan gets that win. Next up, Brownsville Jets versus Super Mariota. Brad was able to build up a big enough lead to stave off Mike because Mike was kind of relying down the stretch on Deebo Samuel, who did pretty good, but not quite enough to get him over the hump. And then, Mike is on a slide right now. He's lost quite a bit in a row now, and he's gonna really need to have a turnaround from Jackson, Samuel, and Eckler, in my opinion, because those are the guys that are gonna be able to carry him. Jackson only had 19 points. He needs like more Justin Fields type numbers, or at least Jalen Hurts type numbers. Deebo Samuel, this is a better game than what we've seen, so maybe that's hopefully a positive going forward. We played McKenzie, but McKenzie didn't play. Eckler again, 18.9. That's right on the money of what they predicted, what Yahoo predicted of him. But he needs those big games from him that made him RB1 for a little while. Kareem Hunt only had 6.9. It was not a good day for Cleveland running backs. Tyler Higbee, only 6.5. Kenyon Drake, only 7.3. Carlson actually was one of your better performers with 15.9. You also had a negative 0.3 points from the Giants, and I cannot blame you for this because usually Detroit is going to give you a bunch of turnovers, but the exact opposite happened. Detroit stomped on the Giants, and then actually if you had played the Detroit defense, you would have been much better and maybe possibly pulling off a win with this. On the bench, oh boy, your bench got decimated. So waiting for Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown to come back. Melvin Gordon got 10.3, but he fumbled, and as of today, he no longer is on a roster. Denver released him, so he's bye-bye unless he gets pulled onto another team. So I understand hanging out to him for a little while, but you may need to find a replacement for him. Wan'Dale Robinson was balling out in Detroit. Against Detroit, and then he got hurt. He was up to that 300. He was up to that 100-yard rush receiving point, and then what happened was he tore his ACL. It's confirmed. So tough. DPJ, big game, 14.6. So he's a guy who I think automatically put him into your starting lineup. Had you put him there instead of McKenzie, I think you get the win, right? Well, it's awfully close. Yeah, I think you get the win with him. Tua had a bye week, and Woods had a decent game. And then for Brad, Mariota had an okay 20.34. Allen Robinson, I guess a little bit more value now that Cooper Kupp is out, 12.7. Myers had 7.1. Henderson only had 1.1. A big game from Najee Harris. He kind of balled out today. Yesterday, and looked like 2021 Najee Harris. So hopefully it's a positive for you going forward. Knox had 10.5. Joe Mixon, I think he got hurt, 8.4. Was it a concussion or something? But he got knocked out of the game. But it's okay because you were able to survive. And then I think his backup, Perrin, Samaji, kind of went off. Matt Gay, pretty good, 12.1. And then the Philly D, 8. And then off the bench, not a whole lot to go by. I think we do want to mention Kadarius Toney. I was very interested in seeing how how good he was going to be, along with some of the other Kansas City guys, but I think he got hurt. So that's a tough loss for him. This after he was being hyped up by his own teammates. Like I think Kelsey was like I don't know how the Giants let this guy go. That's how talented he is. But hopefully, maybe it's a short-term injury. But we'll see. Next up, Blitz and Ritz versus Daddy Danny Melch team. Richie. Oh boy, a couple of donuts here. He missed out on being able to replace his quarterback. Kyler Murray didn't play tonight, and that would have definitely made a difference had you had time to sub him in or sub out Kyler Murray. TJ McLaurin, 7.7. Drake London, 6.7. And most of that was just the touchdown. I don't know how. 1 reception, 2 yards, and a touchdown. All of that was 6.7 points. Alvin Kamara, 12.1, kind of pedestrian. Damian Pierce, only 3.7. I saw a video of him getting body slammed. Cole Kmet had this really amazing catch. And he looks good, but just not getting enough for the target share. Only 5 points. Montgomery was your best play, and this is because what's his name got? Herbert is out, right? Herbert is on IR, so that really boosts Montgomery's stock for you. And then Graham Gano. So sorry, because I watched this game and they had like a couple of extra points that they were going for. One of them kicked it down the middle, and then a gust of wind just blew it to the side. And then the other one, he kicked at the upright, and it banked off of it. And then the third one, they just had to go for 2. So Gano was kind of worth it. So that was your second donut. Dallas D was dominant, and so you were able to get 17 points out of that. I guess just not a lot of turnovers. So as dominant as they were, this is surprisingly low to me. James Conner did pretty good tonight. He had a touchdown, so he had 13.8. And that is also another one who might have helped you take a win from Gary. But Gary pulls off this win despite Kirk Cousins only having 4.4 points. Ooh. Again, Minnesota got destroyed. And then Devontae Adams was your best player. So him rounding into form is good, 29.6. Rondell Moore tonight lowered your score by half a point. Algier had 7.7. Ramondre Stevenson, 12.7. Just low scores across the board. And Andrews, decent for a tight end, 9.3, so he's back and healthy. Gabe Davis, 9.3. Jake Elliott, 4.7. And the New York Jets, 11.5. Off your bench, the most notable guy is Christian Watson. And so, remember we were talking about Green Bay wide receivers, and then we did talk about, what's his name, Dubs for a lot. But that was kind of mostly because he was like the last man standing as far as who Aaron Rodgers can target. But keep in mind, Christian Watson was the first rookie wide receiver taken. And I was high on him too, just because he has all those measurables. He's tall, he's fast, he has really good hands. And as he's shown in the past couple of weeks, he's a touchdown machine. So within the past couple of games, he's had 5 touchdowns, which is kind of crazy. That can be a little bit gimmicky. What you need to see more from him is like good route running, and hopefully he becomes more involved in the regular passing game, and then he can be a star for Gary. Next up, Automatic versus Riding with Mahomes. This was another pretty close game. This one has, it was basically Darren building up a lead, and then Aaron trying to rally to come back with the late Sunday night game. So Derek Carr, mostly out of necessity, I think, because of how bad they were the previous week, but they did bounce back and were able to steal a win from Denver. But he had a decent game, 22.58, Claypool only had 2.1. So I don't know. That Chicago situation is going to be weird, right? So Moody didn't do too much. Claypool hasn't done much, and Justin Fields' shoulder is injured. So I don't know what that means for those wide receivers. Van Jefferson only had 5.6. Chuba Hubbard 3.9. The Carolina running backs just did not do good. Baltimore shut them down. Ezekiel Elliott had a really good game, first game back after injury, 18.7. Is this his first game? Well, whatever it is, he came back and did really well, 18.7. Ran hard. Hurst only had 3.8. Amari Cooper, really good, and this might be the one that gave you that separation. 27.3 is your big performer. Justin Tucker only 8 point. He had a decent 8.9, and then the New England D, a really good 18.3. I think big part of that is that return touchdown. Like the end of the game, right? The game is 3-3 with a few seconds left. The Jets punted, and the special teams for New England returns it for a touchdown, ending the game. It's bonkers. So that maybe that was the one that kind of gave you that cherry on top for you to knock off Aaron. Aaron was trying to rally with that late game with Mahomes, and Mahomes is definitely capable of doing it. He had 29.86 points, bringing him within single digits, but it just wasn't enough. Justin Jefferson, again, part of that. They just got stomped on. That's what it was. Nobody did good for Minnesota this week. He only had 4.8. T. Higgins had a big game, 19.3. Saquon Barkley is another one who got shut out. You did not expect it, but Detroit figured out how to shut him down. So as consistent as he has been, this gives him, I think this is his lowest score of the season. And he's had at least double digits every single game. Yeah. So I was telling Darren, you got to thank the Dallas D for shutting down Jefferson and the Detroit D for shutting down Barkley. So his horses, his race horses got shut down. Trying to play Kyron Williams, he, for coming in, that's a pretty good amount, I would say. 7 rushing attempts, 36 yards when receiving 1 So that kind of bodes well for him in the future. So maybe take the carries away from Cam Akers, take it away from Henderson, and give it to the rookie, especially with Stafford being on concussion protocol. Njoku only had 2.7. Tyler Boyd only had 5.2. Bass had one of the greatest kicking games of the season with 29 points. Just booming it. Now, imagine if this game was played in the snow in Buffalo. Bass is not getting this 29 points. So Detroit giveth and Detroit taketh away. So they give you a dome for Tyler Bass to get 29 points in, and they take away by shutting down Saquon Barkley. So, too bad. Darren wins that one. And then on the bench, the most notable one is Palmer, 26.6. And like I was saying in the beginning, what a difference it makes when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are there. Because it's not an issue of stealing targets. It's more an issue of like rising up the level of play of the entire team, and everyone benefits. And Palmer benefited from that by having 26.6. Had you played him for some odd reason, I can understand. Maybe you're thinking Keenan Allen's back, Mike Allen's back, so maybe Josh Palmer's going to take a back seat. But instead, they served as decoys and opened it up for him. So that's a positive going forward, unless it depends, because Mike Williams seems to be out again. Next matchup, Eric versus Jeremy. Jeremy has the high score of the week. He had big scores from the usual suspects. Justin Herbert actually had one of the better games, like we said, because those receivers came back, 23 points. Stephon Diggs had an okay 12.8. Chris Olave had a big game, 18.7. like toasting, what's his name? Jalen Ramsey. So he had 18.7. Derrick Henry, the usual 27.36 that you can expect from him on Thursday. Singletary had a really good game, 18.5. TJ Hawkinson, um, they targeted him a lot, but he only had 34 yards, so he only gave you 5.9. And what's funny is Hawkinson was like, when he was like, I can finally get ready to win now, only to get blasted and lose um, after being traded. Cordero Patterson, he sets a record with most kickoff return touchdowns. So he had 147 return yards, and one of them was for a touchdown. So big scores for him, 18.78. So a really great flex position there. McPherson has also a good kicking game, 19.8 points. The Cincy D only 2.1. Off the bench, the better surprising quarterback was Jimmy Garoppolo, 27.52. I don't know if that means that Arizona's D is that bad, or maybe the weapons are just like rounding into form now that Christian McCaffrey is there. But whatever the case may be, he's a decent guy to have on your bench, especially if he's going to outperform Justin Herbert. Michael Pittman, also benefiting from the fact that Matt Ryan is back, 10.5. And then Isaiah Pacheco. So he was one of the new guys, right? We're really interested in seeing what happens with Kansas City, because Kansas City is dominating outside of Travis Kelce, without any specific skill player just like running away with it. So I'm kind of waiting to figure out who's going to dominate, and at least from the running back position, I think it's Pacheco now. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, stock down, Pacheco up. And then you watch how he runs. He runs hard. So he's a nice guy to have for Jeremy, who's already an overpowered team. Jeremy, if you win this league, I'm gonna put an asterisk on your championship, because you were on auto pick and Gary gave you Derrick Henry. So I'm just kidding. Fair and square, you had to make the moves. I'm just joking. Okay, the last game, Mia Milo versus James. This was one that went down to the end of the night, Monday Night Football. And it boiled down to all of these San Francisco players in Arizona slots that James played. He played DeAndre Hopkins from Arizona, Brandon Ayuk from San Francisco, Christian McCaffrey from San Francisco, George Kittle from San Francisco, and the Arizona D. So I was able to build up enough of a cushion, but he definitely scared me tonight, especially with that last touchdown by Kittle, because he had 2 touchdowns, and one of them, and they were both big long bombs, run after the catch bombs. But it kind of hurt him, because once they built up too big of a lead, then they just benched everybody, and then they kind of shut it down. Like, okay, we don't want nobody injured, so they just emptied out the second stringers, and that was the end of the night for James. So they did really good tonight. Like all the guys tonight, Hopkins decent, 13.6. Brandon Ayuk had 15 points with 2 touchdowns. Every time I had a touchdown, I had a heart attack. McCaffrey was just like grinding out all those yardage. He didn't have any touchdowns, but the scrimmage yards over 100, 14.8 points, and Kittle with those 2 big run after the catch touchdowns, 22.4. The only one that was kind of questionable was playing the Arizona D, who also gave you negative 3.5 points. It's kind of you have all this offense on San Francisco, and then you're counteracting it with the Arizona defense. So there's going to be a net negative effect some way or another. There's going to be some cancellation happening, even though you have Hopkins here. As far as the other guys, playing Daniel Jones was a smart play against Detroit. They usually perform well against Detroit's defense, even with the 2 picks that he had, 30.04. And Robinson had a lot of carries, 15 rushing attempts, but again, the low output. It does look like Gibson is the better of the 2 backs. And then Will Lutz gave you 11.1 points. And then on the bench, not a whole lot to mention. maybe Sky Moore is one of those guys who kind of picked up the slack after Kadarius Toney went out. He had 5 targets, or 5 receptions for 63 yards. So there is some light for him. So hopefully that's a positive for him going forward. As far as my team goes, Justin Fields kind of comes back down to earth, 26.82. The scary thing is he did hurt his non-throwing shoulder. So now, after I was riding high with him for the past couple of weeks, I don't know what's going to happen with him. So I hope he can carry on. Amon-Ra St. Brown did exactly what Yahoo thought he was going to do, 11.6. Pickens had a pretty decent bounce back game, 16.3. And then for me, I gotta tell you guys my dilemma with the running back situation, right? I have 2 Detroit running backs, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. And then I was able to somehow land 2 at least number 1 backs for 2 kind of garbage team, but they're still number 1 backs, so there's some benefit to them, and historically they do pretty good. So I have Deontay Foreman, and then Michael Carter. All because for Carolina, they got rid of, what's his name? McCaffrey. So Foreman moves to the number 1. And then Breece Hall went down, out for the season. So Michael Carter shifts into that number 1 role. Who do I start? Between 2 running back slots and a flex spot. I tell you, this was one of the hardest ones for me to choose from. And I chose to bench Williams and Foreman. I went with Michael Carter because he was coming off a bye week, so I thought he would be fresher. And I benched Williams because I don't know why I did that. And then I paid for it early. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. And when that happened early, I was like, man, if I lose, I deserve to lose for benching him. But thankfully, because of Tony Pollard and his 35.4, he was basically a receiver. He had 109 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. He is what was able to help me build that lead enough to knock James off and move me into basically a 500 position. I'm now 5-5-1 because of that. So yeah, so it really changes the outcome of our league, right? Because like Morgan wins, Brad wins. A lot of us lower tier guys won today. Me, I won, and then the middle of the pack. So what's gonna happen, I think, is maybe like the top 4, Eric, Jeremy, Aaron, and maybe Richie. They're kind of locked in. But that middle of the pack group for the last 2 playoff spots, it's going to be a bloodbath between the guys who are clawing to get up there and the guys who are trying to stay up there. And you can see how the injuries and the changing in situations have affected everyone's team. So we'll see how it goes down the stretch. It's week 11. I think we have up to week 14 for the rest of the regular season because we have 15, 16, 17. No. It's 3 games in the playoffs. There's 18 weeks. So 16, 17, 18. So we have up to week 15 to figure out these last 2 playoff spots. So anyways, may the best guys make it. Put it here, so we'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.